What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we are going to be answering the question that many of you guys have been curious about, and that is breaking down the performance of our Maserati Ghibli in its first month on Turo.
But before we can do that, we gotta go get it.
Now, the Maserati Ghibli has been on the Turo platform for about 6 weeks, and we have 1 month's worth of full data, and that is the month of September. Now, all in all, HP, how would you say that the experience so far with the Maserati has been? Has it exceeded your expectations? Has it not met your expectations? What does that look like?
I think it's getting there. It didn't exceed my expectations at the beginning. It was super slow, and it got me really worried because I frantically started searching for pie flavors that I wanted to get pied in the face with. But it's kind of ramping up. It's becoming more consistent, and we're getting a lot more renters versus the other 5 cars that had tons of renters for it.
My sentiment with it is the same as HP's. Like, it started off extremely slow. Like, the first probably 2 weeks or so that we had the Maserati on Turo, I was worried that we had made a mistake. It was sitting all the time. I was like driving it basically almost every day because it was just sitting in our driveway, and I was worried that it wasn't going to get rented out. But slowly the ball started to roll, and once the ball started rolling, it's been doing really well. In fact, we are picking it up now from it was out for 5 days, and we are going to go wash it. That way we can prep it for its rental tomorrow, which it's going out for the weekend.
I love this car. I mean, this car is so rare. You never see any of them on the road either, which is so cool. Cut that. Cut it. Cut it.
So before we dig into the specific numbers, let's first talk about some of the different aspects of this entire scenario, the entire equation that I know HP and I are both concerned about, and many of you guys in the comments of our videos have also been curious about these aspects as well. The first one is the time commitment. So whenever it comes to the time commitment for a fleet of cars, there are a few things that we should take into account. Number one, the time to maintain the vehicles. So things like oil changes, tires, wear and tear, maintenance, things like that. Number 2 is repairs, so things that aren't really considered maintenance but absolutely have to be taken into account with the cars. And number 3 is the time it takes for you to check in and out the vehicles. Now, in theory, the Maserati should win in all 3 of these categories because 1 car is of course going to take less time than 5 cars. But I feel like, at least I've found, that that hasn't really been the case.
One thing that's really surprising is just the time it takes to get this vehicle prepped and ready and listed for the next renter. We take about 5 times as many pictures on this car than we do one of our other cars because we want to be super detail oriented and make sure that any bit of damage is caught the moment it happens.
Not only that, but there is a certain expectation that comes with renting a Maserati. Now, I know a Maserati isn't a Lamborghini, it's not a Ferrari. There are of course a lot of cars out there that are much nicer than this car, but the people that are renting this car are doing so because they want to drive a luxury car, and because of that there's a standard that is kind of expected with that type of rental. So because of that, HP will go and wash this car each and every time it goes out on a rental, whereas we don't do that with all of our other cars. We of course disinfect it, we vacuum it, we make sure that the car is tidy, but we do not drive to the car wash, and we don't go and get a professional car wash done with any of our other cars on a consistent basis. But we do every single rental with this Maserati. Another aspect that has of course taken a toll on the car, even just the short period of time that this car has been rented out, is the wear and tear items that are really going to start adding up over time.
And it's small things, but they're big to us because we're really watching the car, you know, start chipping down, quite literally. There's chips on the windshield that are starting to appear, and they're becoming a lot more noticeable every rental that we get. There's also a lot of chips on the bumper as well, which you can kind of see a few here, and pretty much everywhere. A nice update is that these little bumper guards we put on here to stop all the scratching of the bumper is actually working pretty well. You can see that they're actually getting pretty chewed up themselves, which means it's working, which in my opinion means that it's saving the bumper cover at least from those pretty big curb hits.
I was surprised at how much those bumper covers cost, but it seems like it was a $100 well spent.
Oh yeah. And as you can see, even rock chips that quite literally look like something skipped across the hood, they're definitely making the perfect hood not so perfect anymore.
And the thing about these little rock chips, the little scratches that happen on the car, is that they aren't covered by Turo damage. They're considered wear and tear, not actual vehicle damage. And because of that, they aren't covered the same way that like a car getting sideswiped or a car having a flat tire or a car having a cracked windshield would have. We really have to take into account the small pieces of damage that happen to the vehicle because we're not going to get paid out for it, but it will absolutely have an impact whenever we go to sell the car.
So without further ado, let's talk about the numbers.
So let's first, you just chugged some coffee and I'm taking a huge aroma of coffee.
It's mixed with onions and dill.
I wonder why I can't fall asleep at night to chug coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Rude.
So let's first talk about the fact that this experiment is flawed, and this is something that has become very apparent to both HP and I as we've been trying to figure out a way to fairly take into account the cost, the labor, the profit of each one of these cars. Now, whenever it comes down to like this competition that we have with the 5 economical cars versus the Maserati, we're taking things into account like HP's time when working on the cars, the time of checking in the cars, as well as the expenses of the cars as well. But the problem is that apples aren't apples here either. Like, we're comparing apples to oranges because of the fact that one, the Maserati is financed, so there's a monthly car payment for it. The other cars are not financed, so there isn't a monthly car payment. Additionally is the fact that a Maserati is a 2015, whereas our Yaris is a 2007. Like, the playing field isn't equal, and so the goal with this experiment is going to try to be as transparent as possible with the cost and the performance of these cars, but just know that it isn't a perfect equation.
So when we're talking about these numbers, we're not taking into account the Maserati's car payment because the other vehicles do not have a car payment.
But we are taking into account things like HP's time, as well as the supplies, the tools, any type of maintenance issues that we do have to buy on the cars. So things like insurance, the car wash membership that we have on the Maserati, the new transmission that we just had to buy for the Toyota Yaris, those things are getting taken into account, but not the monthly car payment, because if we took the car payment of the Maserati into account, there would be no competition. Like, it would just get completely smoked by the other cars.
So the 5 cars up against our Maserati are going to be the red Ford Focus, the 2008 Escape, the 2007 Toyota Yaris, which does have a blown transmission, but we'll talk about that in another video, the Honda Fit, and lastly, the green Mazda 2. Now in total, all 5 of the economy cars made $2,549 after expenses.
So this does take into account things like oil changes, repairs, of course HP's time. So that is the take-home pay for those 5 cars. Now this is whenever we get into the Maserati, which does require some, I think, external context surrounding it. So the Maserati, after all expenses had been paid, except for the car payment not being taken into account, it made $405. If we take the car payment into account for the month of September with the Maserati, it actually lost $200. So for the month of September, the Maserati brought in a total income of $961, and we had just about $500 in expenses for the car.
And some of the things we bought for the vehicle was we had to do an alignment on it right off the bat because it was kind of pulling to the right. We also had to buy insurance for the vehicle, and we had to install a tracker to make sure we knew where the Maserati was at all times, and a lot of this added up.
So a lot of the expenses that came up with the Maserati for the month of September are things that we won't have to buy again. For example, we won't have to buy another tracking device. We won't have to buy another lockbox. We won't have to do another alignment. We won't have to buy another like bumper guard. So there's a lot of those expenses that were kind of one and done expenses. So moving forward, it will be much more profitable.
Now, to give you some insight of how it's been doing for October, the Maserati has been rocking it. It's been doing really well, being rented pretty consistently throughout the week, and we're right on pace to about $1,800 for the month so far.
Which, to be honest, is much more than I thought that it would do. I'm super, super happy with that number. So even though the month of September seemed to be pretty slow, and to be honest, I was even happy with September. Like, I wasn't disappointed with September, especially considering the fact that we were driving a lot for personal use because it wasn't getting rented out. We put a ton of money into the preparation to listing it on Turo, and so because of that, I was pumped with it making 900. So the fact that we are probably going to double that this month in October, I think is a big feat.
We are playing around with the pricing and some of the settings for the Maserati to see what it should be priced out on certain days versus like the weekend or weekdays, and hopefully that'll kind of bring us to a better success when renting out this Maserati.
And on that same note as well, we're trying to figure out, okay, should we require longer weekend trips? Like, what does it look like? What is the behavior of a Maserati renter? Because it is quite a bit different than our other renters, because they are renting the car for a like luxury use rather than just A to B commuting. But with that being said, you guys, we hope that this gave you some pretty good insight into how the Maserati is doing. I know that I've been pleased with how it's doing. I think you've been pleased with it as well. And so it'll be interesting to see how it does going into the holiday season. The holidays are right around the corner, and it is a notoriously good time for car rentals in Turo this time of year.
And guys, with that being said, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell, and we'll see you on the next episode.